And before we go to proceed with discussion about unique MySQL configuration, we have another poll for you. So back to you, JJ.
Yeah, thanks, Christoph. So yeah, before we continue, we want to ask you another quick question to everyone in the audience here, talking about configuration changes, just to see how you test yourselves configuration changes before you apply them in a production environment. So it'd be great to get your feedback here. Maybe you have a separate test environment which mirrors your production environment, or maybe you use a test environment with different hardware than the production environment, or maybe use a separate host and syntactical benchmarks like sysbench, or maybe you implement a change on one of the prod servers and then you watch the outcome. That could be the case, or maybe you don't test at all because you're quite happy with how things are going and just apply the changes directly on the production server. So it'd be great to see how you currently do this within your organization, just to give us a bit of insight on how you do things yourselves. I'll just give it a few seconds for everyone to participate. And in the meantime, just to remind you also that you can ask us questions on the content that you're seeing at any moment during this webinar. So feel free to use the question section of your control panel. And we'll take a few minutes towards the end of the webinar to answer any questions you may have. And of course, even after the webinar, we can continue the conversation. But if you have questions now, feel free to ask them. And we'll be happy to answer them towards the end of this webinar. But for now, thanks for providing your feedback here. I'll just give this a few more seconds, and then I'll share the results again, of course. Thanks very much. I'm just going to close this now. Great. So it's a bit of a tie between, some of you have a separate test environment which mirrors the production environment, or you have a test environment with different hardware than the production environment. And then it kind of breaks down into the other. It's interesting to see also that some of you don't test, so maybe you're quite happy with the way that your config changes are going to be implemented. So that's interesting to hear about as well. Any comments on this, Christoph, before you take over again?
Yeah. So I mean, it's great to see that a lot of people use a correct way of doing the test, so set a separate environment which mirrors production, because this is the only way you can actually get that's the way you get the most relevant results that you can apply to production. Separate test environment with different hardware is also fine, I would say. The main difference is that sometimes the hardware is different. The results can be a little bit skewed one way or another. So yeah, and of course, I mean, for those who do not make any tests, this is really dangerous way of making changes. So I would strongly recommend to still think about implementing some kind of a testing process in your environment.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Christoph, and thanks everyone for participating in this poll. And I hand back over to you now.
Okay, so thank you, JJ, and let's get back to discussing the MySQL configuration tuning. Again, we'll start with memory tuning. So the main buffer, the main source of memory utilization in MySQL is in a DB buffer pool, which is used to cache data and store dirty pages. In this particular case, more is better. So you want to make this buffer as big as possible, to make sure that, at least make it large enough to fit your data set within, if it is possible. You still have to keep in mind that there are some other buffers, like per join buffers, per session buffers, or temporary tables, in-memory temporary tables, which which still, I mean, you need some memory. So you cannot just you shouldn't over allocate. So you may have heard about 80% rule. So which means that allocate 80% of your memory to buffer pool, and that's basically it. The thing is that this is okay. I would say this is okay rule. The thing is that it is not the, let's say for larger hosts, again like 128 gigabytes, I would say it is more like 90% rule than 80%, because otherwise you will just leave, you will leave too much unused memory. So it's okay, but for smaller hosts. On the other hand, if you, for example, run a Galera cluster, I would say it would be more like 70% than 80, because Galera also uses memory for some of its structures, like Gcache, for example, but some other buffers are there as well. So your memory footprint of your MySQL will be even bigger than regular MySQL server. In general, you want to make sure you are on the side of too small buffer pool than too large. I mean, unless you run MySQL 5.7. So those of you who are lucky to run 5.7 in production, you can resize the DB buffer pool dynamically from the just set it from MySQL console, and that's it. Otherwise, it's a process of restarting every host, and in MySQL replication environment, for example, this basically means that you have to restart, change settings on every host, restart every slave, then failover, and then restart master. So it becomes pretty annoying, pretty quick. So that's why you want to be, it's better to be on a too small size than too large. From my experience, so for fairly loaded host, I'm talking about 20, 30 running threads with 128 gigabytes of memory, that would be okay to leave something around 15 gigabytes of memory for some other buffers. I'm talking here about more or less OLTP type of workload running on this host. On the so basically everything depends on the workload, right? So obviously your mileage will vary, and this is something you have to test for yourself for your particular query mix. Other buffers. So we have per session buffers in DB, like sort buffer size, read buffer size, read random buffer size, and those are allocated on per session level, which means that if you have multiple sessions running, the memory allocation can grow up pretty quickly. There's also per join buffer, join buffer size, and it is allocated per join. So if you're running a lot of joins in your queries, keep in mind that this is something, again, buffer which can quickly increase the memory utilization. By default, those settings are set to rather small values, and this is, it's like 180 kilobytes, 256 kilobytes, something like that. And this is because in those particular cases, more is not always better. The thing is that at 256 kilobytes, the way how memory is allocated changes. So for small chunks, up to 256K, malloc is used, and it's much faster than mmap, which is used for larger chunks of memory. So actually, you may see that your performance drops when you increase those values. In general, it is, again, up to you to benchmark and see. I mean, I'm not saying that you should not increase those values to some larger setting, right? What I'm saying is that you want to make sure that you tested this change to ensure that you're actually improving your performance and not losing it. Because sometimes, let's say, during buffer size should be increased, yeah, obviously. But again, it may not be the best option, so you just have to test.